I'm a parapsychologist and deal with unexplained crime. I'm here to talk to you about the COVID head suicides. What did you see in the house?
I saw her.
Who took the photos?
Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Screen One interview. And today I am joined by Ayvianna Snow, who is about to appear in Baron Rye and the House on the Cliff, which is headed to Amazon Prime, I believe, at the end of the month.
That's right. Hello, thank you so much for speaking to me. I'm very, very grateful. Yes, so Baron Rye comes out on Amazon Prime on the 28th of January.
Mm-hmm. So do you want to tell us a bit about it, your character, and don't obviously spoil it because obviously you're.
Yeah, I know. So it's a paranormal detective story. It's about a couple who move to the south of England and buy this beautiful new house, and it's all lovely. And then scary things start happening, and they realize they've got a ghost. And I don't want to say too much, but there's a ghost who's pushing people off the cliff.
Delightful.
But maybe they're falling, or are they being pushed?
Who knows?
I don't know.
That's the mystery.
People are being lured to a precipice. And then so a sort of ghost detective arrives to try and solve the mystery. So it's good fun. It's a kind of fusion of, I would say, Western horror tradition with Bollywood, because the director and some of the main cast are Indian. So they bring that sort of wonderful, big, colourful Bollywood influence with them. And there are definitely moments when it's almost like a Baz Luhrmann style, really big, kaleidoscopic, colourful thing. But at its core, it's a horror story. So yeah, I think it's good fun. I maybe wouldn't watch it with the children because it does get quite frightening at some points. But for adults, it's good fun.
Yeah. So you do a lot of work in horror, don't you? I mean, like, saying like Baron Rye, you've got other films that you've done, especially over the last couple of years. And I've got to say, you're quite possibly one of the most hardest working actors in this country that I have seen.
Oh my God. I wish.
You're almost like like Bruce Willis is doing every action movie under the sun in 10 minutes, but you actually seem to be, a decent quality actor.
Every horror film under the sun.
Work, rather than just showing up for a paycheck. So you've got plenty coming out. So how did you come into Baron Rye? Was it just your?
I did a few days on a film called Time to Dance a few years ago, which was another Bollywood epic. Again, kind of, what do you call that Australian film? Strictly Ballroom. Yeah. So they were kind of doing that, but Bollywood, if you know what I mean. And I only had about 2 lines in it. It was not a big part at all, but they were slightly behind schedule, shall we say. And I ended up spending 4 days on this set in Elstree waiting to film 2 lines. And I was going out of my mind with boredom, sitting in this tiny little cabin going, oh my God, when will death come? But while I was there, because I had so much free time, sitting around, I got quite friendly with one of the production assistants. So it's the guy who was sort of the second AD. And we stayed in touch afterwards. And he was working on Baron Rye. And he brought me in. He sort of sent me a text and said, oh, they're casting for Baron Rye. Do you want to come in? And I was brought in originally to read for a different role. I read originally for Jenny, who was a sort of police inspector coming to investigate all these deaths. And then when I got in, I had prepared this beautiful audition, and they took one look at me and said, oh, you look too young. No one will believe that. And I thought, oh, well, I'm glad I came all this way. And but then seeing as I was there, they said, well, do you want to read for this other character, Polly, who's a young girl and she's excited about her marriage and she's a bride? And I said, all right. and annoyingly, I had come dressed as a policewoman, so I had to sort of very quickly change. It was like, oh God, change my hair quickly. Yeah, so I ended up getting that instead. That happens quite a lot to me. I get brought in to read for one thing, and then I end up playing something else.
Why do you think that is? Do you think they've got a preconceived notion of who you're going to be, or?
I don't know. I do get cast as ghosts an awful lot. I think I must have a ghostly look about me or something, and I think people see me in person and go, "Oh, a ghost." So,
what it is, it's Snow that
I think it's the slightly translucent skin. I think maybe or something. Yeah.
I don't believe in these spirits.
So yeah, you just touched on point that you do a lot of work in horror movies and sort of and so is that just something you like to do, or is it just the way the sort of roles come along?
It happened at first kind of by accident, I would say, that I happened to get cast in a horror film, but since I've started doing it, I've really developed a love for that genre. And I genuinely, I think we're entering a sort of golden age of horror nowadays. Some of the best films being made right now are horror. When you look at, there's a great company, I think they're American, A24 Films, who made The Witch, and they made Lamb, which I saw quite recently. And it's fantastic what they're doing within the horror genre. So they're using horror, but in a very intelligent way. So they're not just slasher films and just sort of people being killed one after the other and sort of endless gory deaths. It's psychological horror. It's what I love about horror is it's such a versatile genre. You can do a sci-fi that's a horror. You can do a period drama that's a horror. You can do, a romance that's horror. It lends itself to so many different genres and different styles. And people can sometimes be terribly kind of snobbish about horror. Like I've had people say that to me, oh, she's just a horror actress. And yet I think it's really ridiculous. I mean, some of the best films that were ever made are horror films. Like The Shining is frequently cited as one of the best films ever made. That's basically a horror film about a haunted house, at its core. So I'm very proud to be associated with horror.
Yeah, like I say, it's great. I mean, are you more interested in the psychological side, or are you quite happy to get, the gore, the blood, the running around with knives and guns and whatever? Which do you have any preference, or do you just enjoy the whole sort of spectrum?
I would say I prefer psychological horror, and I prefer horror that's been written with some kind of intelligent script, and the sort of like I often cite Little Joe as one of my favorite recent horror films, and there aren't any gory, bloody deaths in that film. It's about creating a creeping sense of unease. And you never really get an answer at the end as to whether the Little Joe plant really is, creating all this evil, or whether it's just in her head. And that to me is the most terrifying thing about, can I trust my own perceptions of reality? Am I safe in my own mind? And that's actually deeply disturbing on a more visceral level. And so many great roles for women as well, I think, in the horror genre at the moment. When you look at, again, I've already said The Witch, Midsummer, Lamb, they all had a really strong, interesting female lead. So I think that's a very positive thing as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think horror, I don't know why, generally tends to lean towards female leads generally across the board. I think it's this idea that you're all kind of I think they're scared of everything kind of thing. But I think that kind of, over the last couple of years, has really been sort of washed away, and you're coming back with. I mean, Scream's just been released, and that features strong female leads in it. So,
well, I think you're right in that it used to be the case that it was just about a damsel in distress and sort of watching pretty girls being killed on a sort of
running around with their clothes falling off,
like on a voyeur sort of level. Yeah. I think we are moving beyond that, and I think we are now seeing more interesting real women rather than just that sort of cardboard cutout pretty girl screaming thing.
Which is cool. So moving on, so another film you've had out recently, or is coming out, is Hollow.
I forget things. I imagine things. It's like I'm losing myself. It was walking across the bed.
What, Muppets?
Tell me I'm not losing my mind.
A little bit about Hollow, because I think this is very different to Baron Rye, I believe.
Very different, you're right. So Hollow is coming out on the 15th of February. I think also on Amazon, I think. So Hollow is really kind of what I was speaking about. It's a psychological horror, and the lead character, played by Pat Garrett, there's kind of a question over whether she's losing her mind. Is she developing Alzheimer's? Is she kind of seeing things, or are these things really happening? So when we first meet her, she has just lost her husband and she's grieving, obviously, and she's in that place of mourning. And then she starts to notice weird things happening in her home, things moving, and she thinks, did I leave that there? Or I could have sworn I left that in the other room. And just small things, but it builds up to this point where there is a question over can I trust my own perceptions? And Jonathan Zaurin, I think, is a real master of portraying that on screen. And he deals with the topic of Alzheimer's in a very sensitive way, which, is not always the case on screen. I think he's done a really beautiful job with it. It's very sensitively put together, and there's an attention to detail and a real artistry in how it's been shot and edited. It was written by Keith Temple, who was a TV writer for years, wrote Doctor Who. So, very, very experienced, very high caliber of people involved. Pat gives a beautiful performance. It's just lovely. And it's great. I feel very proud to be associated with it. And it's great when you do something and then you watch it and you think, I am genuinely really proud of that film. And I play, the lead character is called Beth, and I play Beth as a younger woman in a sort of series of flashbacks. Again, it's a slight, there's a few scenes where Pat and me are kind of speaking to each other. So Pat is speaking to her younger self. So there's a question again over who I am. Am I someone she's imagining? Am I another ghost? Always a ghost. And but they have a really beautiful relationship on screen. And toward the end, I think my character gives her strength and sort of helps her to get through the sort of final denouement of the whole piece. It's just really, really lovely.
Do you think streaming platforms are giving, like, for example, you opportunities that you wouldn't necessarily get, because there's a whole dearth of films and people are finding things that they wouldn't used to? I mean, obviously, back in the day, for some of us who are around my age, we used to go to video stores, and they don't exist anymore. But you would, there were 10,000, low-budget horror films sitting on the shelf. You would always go for the one at the top, not the ones down the bottom, because you couldn't look that far. But with streaming platforms, things are more suited to what people watch. So, Baron Rye and this, and they all will pop up because they'll be new, and also people who like horror films are going to get them put in their thing. So do you think it gives, these platforms give you more exposure? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's so hard to get a cinema release with a low budget indie film, just because of budgetary constraints. So, I mean, Baron Rye did have a cinema release, a small cinema release last year, but Hollow hasn't gotten a cinema release. So, as you were saying, maybe 30 years ago, it would have just disappeared because there's nowhere for it to go. Yeah. But nowadays, there is a platform for independent film. It can go on Amazon, it can go on Netflix and find a home and hopefully a following. So it gives a platform for people like Jonathan Zaurin who are making really great, high quality work, but just not making it at that kind of really, really big budget studio level. Not yet, anyway. I mean, obviously, I hope he goes on to do really well. But and I hope that it will find a following, and hopefully it will come up on the sort of people who like horror films. Then it comes up saying, we recommend these other films that you might also like. So hopefully it helps people to find it, I hope.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So now let's talk about some of your films that you've got coming up this year. Let's start with The Good Wife, shall we? Another horror film. There is definitely
always.
You're in a costume drama. That's what we want to know, or a high comedy, something like that. But anyway, people love the horror. What can we say? So do you want to tell us about Good Wife?
That was so much fun. I had a great time doing that because I got to play two parts. So it's a kind of doppelganger thing. There's a couple living together in a house, and then there's a ghost, always a ghost. And the sort of the wife, the good wife, and the ghost are played by the same actress, myself, which I think gives it a really interesting twist. I think if it were just if the ghost were played by just a different actress, I think it would be less interesting because then it just becomes another house with a ghost. I think because they're played by the same woman, you begin to see them as two sides of the same person. And they begin to kind of blur into one in the husband's head. And there's a question sometimes when you see Elizabeth and when you see Jane, Elizabeth and Fiona rather, which one is it? Who are we seeing at this point? So it plays with the audience's mind. And I think what I found interesting about it was it spoke to me about kind of the expectations that we place on women in relationships in society. So Fiona, who's the wife, she's a modern, ballsy kind of woman, and she's confident and she knows what she wants and she doesn't take any shit and she kind of has her own opinion, and sometimes she's human, sometimes she nags, sometimes she's annoying. Whereas the ghost is demure and lovely and laughs at all his jokes and never complains. And he begins to fall in love with the ghost over the real woman who's human, has flaws. And it kind of speaks to, I don't know, I sometimes think, is this what men actually want from women? just be nice and be pretty and agree with everything I say and don't have an opinion of your own. So I think it's really interesting.
So how was it playing against yourself? So was it quite a protracted filming experience? Because of the shots in.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, there was some quite difficult toward the end. Anyway, there were moments where all three of us were in the scene and sort of going in and out of each other's bodies and things, and very complicated, and particularly on a low budget. I think on a bigger budget there would have been just green screens everywhere, but when you've got the low budget, it's actually much harder to make a film on a low budget because you've got to try and be resourceful and find ways of making it work. But we haven't got a huge green screen studio to do this. We've got this much, we've got this space, and we had one green cloth, and you've got to try and make it work. There were an awful lot. I spent so much time in costume and makeup. Sometimes we would be, because they both were dressed differently and looked slightly different. So, sometimes I would be Fiona in the morning, and then she changes to Elizabeth to do the next scene, and then back to Fiona in the evening. And, just forever hair up, hair down, makeup on, makeup off, dress on, dress off, and trying to switch between the two characters. It was interesting trying to differentiate between the two women as well, because they couldn't be too different. Well, I remember at the very first read through, I gave them both a different accent. And then the director said to me afterwards, that's too different because the audience will immediately be able to tell which one you are, and it will be too jarring. So they have to be, so in the end, I gave them the same voice, but I had to find subtle ways of differentiating them. So it might be just that Elizabeth stood in a slightly different way and was slightly more held, whereas Fiona stood in a more modern way and had a bit more of a slouch or a bit more of an attitude with how she spoke. So, because there has to be a question in the audience's mind sometimes of which one is it, you know? So trying to sort of subtly project a different energy just through how you stand or how you hold yourself. That's what I was attempting to do anyway. See whether I succeeded or not.
That one's not out just yet, is it? Have you got a release date on that one, or is it still?
No, not yet. It's still post. So we'll see how that looks.
That should be good. No, I'm quite looking forward to that. I mean, and another one where you say you're working not on low budget stuff. You've got Dream Hacker coming out now. There's quite a big cast in this film.
Huge, yeah.
Jennifer Connelly, for goodness sake. I mean, and you've got Marina Sirtis of Star Trek fame, obviously.
Do you know, funnily enough, I actually, because it is such a big cast, I think people imagine that we all meet each other, and you don't necessarily. Yeah. I did the initial read through, and then my scene was shot. I think I was the very, very final day of shooting. So they'd already shot the whole movie, and I was brought in to do, literally, I only have one scene at the very end. And I didn't realize Marina Sirtis was in it. And it was only, no, honestly. And then I was at Blacks, which is a private members club in London. I went to a fundraiser event just before Christmas. They were raising money for charity for, I think, Safety Curtain, which is a charity which helps actors that have fallen on hard times. And I went to this event for charity, and I sat down, and a woman sat down beside me, and it was Marina Sirtis. And I went, "Oh, hello, nice to meet you." And we were chatting, and she told me she's just moved back. She's been living in LA for 20 years or something. She's just moved back to London. And it was only later that evening when I got home and I went on IMDb and I saw, oh my God, we're in the same film. And I didn't even know. It's such a small world in an odd way. But yeah, so that was lovely. I would have asked her about it had I realised when I met her. I would have said.
Yeah. Teach you for not doing your research first.
Yeah, I should have done it.
I might happen to bump into Marina Sirtis at a charity event, so I should check to see who's in the film.
But that's directed by Richard Coulton, who's a lovely guy and a great friend of mine. And I initially worked with Richard back in 2015 when I made a film called Retribution, where I played the lead. And Richard was not the director back then. He was working as an editor. So he edited that film. It was directed by Christine Black. And then I ran into him again somewhere, and he knew me, and I didn't know him. But obviously he knew my face because he'd been editing me for weeks on end in this film. So he was sick of looking at my face. And he said, "Oh, I remember you." And I, "Oh, do you?" And we got on really well. And then he brought me in. He started directing features after that. And he's brought me in a few times to do things. I appeared in Dangerous Game, which I think was directed by Richard. That starred Callum Best. That was a few years ago. Okay. And we've done a few other projects since then. And I love watching Richard's career because it gets better and better. We made a horror film together actually as well called The Seven, again, a few years ago, about people trapped in a school on sort of Halloween night and, ghosts and everything. But yeah, every film he makes, the quality gets better. And I think he's got a great future ahead of him, I hope. So yeah, he's a great friend. Yeah, it was fun. It's a good film. It's a kind of sci-fi adventure. So it's more or less a two-hander, and the lead actress Molly is really, really, really good. So good. You know, I was so impressed at the read through. I was like, she's amazing.
It's interesting you mentioned the Seven, actually, because friend of Screen One, Jess Impiazzi, is also in that. Alongside.
Yeah, I know Jess. She's
Yes,
lovely.
yeah, we've known Jess for a long while. Good friend of ours. So yeah, so there you go. Another film. Small world.
She was in The Tombs with me as well, actually, which was a Purple Heart film. Yeah. Oh no, it's all the same people over and over again. It's great. It's like a little community. Everyone knows each other.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing sometimes? I don't know.
No, that's good.
So you're quite busy outside of just your acting work, aren't you? So yeah, so you have various other things going on. I was wondering if you want to talk, your sort of work with other actors and stuff. Yes,
so I'm on Equity's Screen Committee, which is the sort of national committee covering the whole of the UK. And we represent any actor that's working on screen. So whether that's a TV show, a film, even people doing like TikTok videos, social media stuff. That's a really growing area, these social media videos.
Yeah.
And the kind of the agreements, the legislation hasn't always moved with the times. So we've just got our first agreement with Netflix, and we're the first union in the world to have an agreement with Netflix and the first to have an agreement with Apple TV. Which I think is a great achievement. We beat SAG actually, and yet they have more resources than us, God knows. So that's a testament to John Barclay and his team at Equity and how good they are.
So how much of that time does it take for you? Are you quite actively involved, or are you just?
No, I'm there every day. I have I have no life at all. I go to several meetings every month. Yeah, well, there's a lot to do. There's a lot of issues that we're working on around the screen and trying to fight for our actors' rights in those areas.
So how do you find time? How do you balance it then? If you're quite busy with that and also with your own acting, is it quite hard to juggle it, or do you set times aside?
It can be difficult. So we have several meetings every month, and obviously sometimes I'm booked. I was slightly worried about the meeting in February because I'm filming my next project in February, and I was hoping it's not going to clash with the branch meeting, and I don't know what I'm going to do if it does clash. I'll have to. Sometimes I ask the director, could you possibly move my scene to the morning, because that would allow me to rush back to central London for the evening. And sometimes it's possible and sometimes it's not. You just have to try to do your best,
So you just mentioned you got a new project coming up in February. Can you talk about that at all? What it is, what's coming up?
I don't know how much I'm allowed to say. I'm going out to Hertfordshire to a beautiful old house in the remote countryside. The project is called Burnt Flowers. I play Alice Keitella, who is a wonderfully manipulative femme fatale sort of character.
Not a ghost.
Not a ghost, for what. I'm branching out beyond. And I'm working with Dean Kilby again. Dean and I worked together on a project called The Final 45 last year, where we played, I played a French resistance fighter during the Second World War, and he played a Nazi officer. So it was quite a complex scene. I won't say too much, but there was a death scene, there was a sex scene, and there were 3 different languages going, because he was German, I was French, and we were both doing a bit of English. So, and I think with a lesser actor, it would have been a bit of a nightmare, but because he was so good and so talented, we got through it really well, and it went really well. So I was very pleased to hear that he's also in Burnt Flowers as well. So we get to work together again. It's nice when you get to work with the same people, and I think we're both English this time, so they'll slightly less fewer languages to worry about this time, so that's good.
That's excellent. That's excellent. So I'm kind of running out of time. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Cool. And everybody, get on Ayvianna's films. I mean, they're all there. They're all coming out on Prime. You've got no excuse. Make sure you check out Braun first at the end of the month, and then go back through some of the others, because I am certain we're going to be seeing a lot more of you in the next couple of years. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So once again, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for speaking to me. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Matt.
No worries at all. And we'll see you all next time on the next Stream One interview. Goodbye.